I had used harm reduction when I was using, in that I knew to use like sterile using supplies, but I didn't really understand harm reduction fully. And I just loved it so much because I started like destigmatizing myself and gaining self-esteem and seeing that I have expertise, and like it feels like it's like my place in the world. I don't know how else to say it. Like I used to look at my drug use in such a negative way, but I'm like proud of it now. It's made me a really compassionate person because of some, being unhoused and like all of these challenges I've experienced through my drug use. It's given me like a social justice mission, and I believe we need to be allies to other movements like Indigenous people. Yeah, everyone. So that wasn't a very good explanation, but yeah, I think that would be the answer.
I'm Colin Burrows, and this is the Woodstein Media Podcast, episode 32. This podcast is produced on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe, and Odawa peoples. This is the second episode in which I have featured Mums Stop the Harm board directors. The first was Ruth Fox on episode 30, and this time one of my two guests is Katie Upham, director for the Atlantic region. Also joining this discussion is Emily Wadden, program director of the Safe Works Access program in St. John's, Newfoundland. In hopes of educating more of the general public about the unregulated drug toxicity crisis and the impact it is having on everyday Canadians, Mums Stop the Harm have created a brief public service announcement, asking the public to help them in their advocacy efforts.
Canada is in a public health crisis of epic proportions.
People are dying every day from a contaminated, unregulated drug supply. All of these deaths are preventable.
More than 43,000 Canadians have lost their lives to toxic drug poisoning.
Every day across Canada, 22 families are informed that their loved one has died.
The crisis has impacted all communities and people from every walk of life.
This could be your child.
Urgent action is required to prevent further deaths.
Join us in advocating for legally regulated, safer drugs for those at risk of death and serious harm.
For your family members, friends, neighbors, and loved ones.
We're all in this together. Please help save lives. Write to your MLAs and your MPs about implementing a regulated legal supply. Regulation is not a radical idea.
Please go to www.mumstoptheharm.com to learn more. This podcast and Woodstein Media are independently produced journalism that you can support through Patreon or by donating through PayPal at woodstein.ca. That's WOOD-STEIN.ca. Thanks for your interest and support. If you support through Patreon, you'll get advanced viewing of most of the interviews for this podcast and other bonuses depending on the support tier you choose. If you enjoy this podcast, you can support it by listening to more episodes and liking, sharing, subscribing, or reviewing them. This is very helpful and appreciated.
How you doing, Colin? Can I ask you what you do, actually?
What I do,
or how'd you get involved? Like, why this area?
Well,
do you like it? Do you work in it?
I was a small town journalist in Ontario, and I did some stories on the homeless community that has sprung up in this town over the last 10 years. It became really visible. And in, I guess, about 5 or 6 months into the pandemic, I did some stories on the community here. And from there, I ended up finding out that many people in my life that I didn't even know were, because I also came from a music background. I was in a punk band for many years. And
sick.
Yeah, so a lot of people who I thought had just moved away from that life. I found out later through friends that they've actually died. Yeah, that's how I came to my interest and why I've been doing these podcasts and
Cool.
everything and telling
How
these
do you
stories.
like speaking? Like, obviously, you moved to more of like an interview format versus like maybe a more writing format. I don't know. That's what I associate with journalism, but is one more of a vibe? Do you like one more than the other?
I prefer writing, but
Oh, really? Okay.
I I've been getting into this
Yeah.
more so not because I feel I'm a terrible speaker. It's the people I talk to that I find really interesting. You're the ones with the stories that really pull it
No, cool.
together.
Cool. No, appreciate the ask for sure.
Okay. So to start off with, and I guess I'll do this kind of individually, whichever one of you wants to answer first. I want to get your background a little bit so that people know why they should listen to you and what your interest is in all this, why you're here.
Katie,
So, which one of you would like to go first for that?
Katie, do you want?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. So my name is Katie Upham and grew up in Nova Scotia. I'll say like not really super rural, but certainly not in an urban area. And I've been injecting drugs on and off for about 16 years, opioids almost exclusively. And I got a lot of my opioids, especially back in the day, from chronic pain patients who maybe their basic needs were being met and needed to make some money. And I don't want to get into like the whole long story, but I started using in my master's of developmental economics at Dalhousie University. And I think this capitalistic hustle culture kind of broke me, and also, trying to cope with some trauma from my past and that kind of stuff. And I went through a lot of different treatments. I tried abstinence for a long, long time because that's what society said was success. And I wanted to be successful. And that really was not, it was not very effective for me. And so I finally got into like opiate agonist therapy treatment, like those kind of treatments. I want to say like 5 years ago. No, it's been more like 7 years ago. I've tried methadone, I've tried Cadian, I've tried Suboxone, and I never really liked any of those medications, but more so, I really hated how you were treated by those clinics. And so, just because I hated like how carceral their policies were, I did come off of OAT and tried the abstinence thing for a few years and used recreationally opioids. People think that if you were a daily user like I was, that you can't do that, but I did that a little bit. And then until I couldn't, and I did have access to safer supply, which I'm really grateful for, because in Nova Scotia there's only 93 people that have access. And maybe I can get into that later, but I felt it was really, really successful. But I have worked in the past for a drug user union in the Atlantic region called the Substance User Network of the Atlantic region. And I'm also on the board of Moms Stop the Harm. And currently I'm self-employed as a substance use health consultant, I call myself, or like harm reduction consultant. I don't really have like a great name for it. So I'm involved in all kinds of stuff. It might be like planning events where people use drugs. I'm a published co-author in a peer-reviewed journals. So I've done like some research on a lot of councils and advisories and that kind of stuff. And a lot of my friends and loved ones use drugs and many have died. And so it's very personal kind of fight for me. Yeah.
Can you expand on how you moved from being a drug user to working with organizations like Mom Stop the Harm?
For sure. 12-step programs, they really didn't work for me, and I really didn't like them, but I wanted to be around people who use drugs and like in a way that was like really positive and that we can make change together and advocate. And before I even knew drug user unions existed, I learned about Mom Stop the Harm actually like 4 or 5 years ago through W5, the TV program. Like they have more reach. Like people listen more to moms and people who use drugs, which anyway, I think all of our experiences are valid, but it's a little frustrating as a person that identifies more so as someone who uses drugs. And they just had such a different approach. I learned about SUNAR, Drug User Union, and I asked to volunteer, and they offered me a position. And I had used harm reduction when I was using, in that I knew to use like sterile using supplies, but I didn't really understand harm reduction fully. And I just loved it so much because I started like destigmatizing myself and gaining self-esteem and seeing that I have expertise, and like it feels like it's like my place in the world. I don't know how else to say it. Like I used to look at my drug use in such a negative way, but I'm like proud of it now. It's made me a really compassionate person because of some, being unhoused and like all of these challenges I've experienced through my drug use. It's given me like a social justice mission, and I believe we need to be allies to other movements like Indigenous people. Yeah, everyone. So that wasn't a very good explanation, but yeah, I think that would be the answer. Sorry.
I wanted to also ask you, because you mentioned being on a safer supply program and how it impacted your life in a positive way. And then you mentioned that there's only 93 of you on it in Nova Scotia. So with that few people allowed to be on it, what kind of hoops did you have to go through to get on it? And with so few people on it at this point, is it really a viable alternative for drug users?
That's a great question. So I got on Safer Supply because of who I knew. And now that sounds really bad, but I don't see it as bad necessarily. It did make me feel guilty though. Like I knew doctors who were prescribing Safer Supply before I had a return to opiate use, like daily return to opiate use. Like I said, I had been using a little recreationally. So when my use became daily and I found that I didn't really want to stop, I reached out to those doctors that I knew, like I had a direct connection with them. And I think like, there's so few of them, and they know me personally, and they didn't want to see me die. People can see that as a conflict of interest or this and that, but I think it just shows their heart that they took me in. And so I did bypass a wait list. Like, and it sounds like really bad, but it provided so much for me because I hadn't been a daily user for a couple years. And so my tolerance was really low, and I could have easily died from the toxic drug supply. I opened my own business. I started my own business that year and like had the most successful financial year on record. And I was injecting drugs 9 months out of that year. And I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose my car. But I also knew that there were people that needed it. I don't know how. Okay. It's a good question to determine who needs Safer Supply most. And I don't know how we determine that. But it felt like obviously there was people that needed it more than me. And so when I started feeling some stability, I started not liking how injection use affects my body. I transitioned off of it. I like, and it was for me, but I also felt quite a bit of guilt, honestly, about others that needed it more, maybe. But like,
be careful there, too. Be careful, because you're bringing yourself way down, and it's not. Don't give that guilt the time of day, right? Like that's not. You're just like, I don't know. You're just shitting on yourself and feeding into it, and I hate to see it because there's no deserving who needs it more. Like that's not what it is, whatsoever.
Yeah, and you know what? The system has created this guilt.
I know, but I'm like, I can't let you go on though. I really can't, because it's like that's not okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've been successful in transitioning off of it. Yeah, and that's what it is. Like there's not enough to go around. Like there's not enough doctors willing to prescribe this, and it's awful. And the model that we have, like you need to have a certain like severity of use or tried other things, and we know that people are using for the first time and dying, and using recreationally and dying. And so Safer Supply does not address those issues either. It's only for like people with the most severe use, supposedly, and they're not the only ones that need it, in my mind. Yeah.
I'll ask Emily then, about your background and how you came to be where you are now.
I guess so. Emily Wadden, right now, I basically I work in the field, and I went to school to work in the field while simultaneously being somebody who used drugs more or less all day, every day, but completely those two very separate beings. Nobody knew, kind of two identities. So I guess by trade, I'm a social worker. It was really random how I got into it. It was very much on a whim because I had never lived my life kind of with this idea like, oh, I'm going to help people. I'm going to do that. Like that was never a lifelong thing. Wasn't even a thought in my head until I think it was one little project. Anyways, I got pointed that direction and decided to go all in. During this time, or during probably it was certainly more than a decade, kind of been like Katie, on and off with, drugs, different drugs, various, I guess, some heavier use, not so heavier use. Sometimes, well, very rarely I had control over it, but typically not, right? Like I can't use drugs recreationally. Don't know what that is, never have been able to. So I was kind of doing all that while also living the separate identity of, being privileged enough to go to social work school, right? Go to university, complete that degree, and then eventually transition into the field. It was in social work that I, on a whim, just due to luck, was introduced to this concept of harm reduction. I'm in the very position now that at the time I interviewed the person in this position, and it was that one day that really just something hit different because like it was mentioned, there is this, even if you don't think consciously about it, certainly there is this, I guess, background noise always that, abstinence is, I guess, the number one, the ideal, like you should stop using drugs. There's no like people, I guess that is always the goal, right? So that's how we're conditioned in the media, this and that, there is no world for using drugs every day, but it not being problematic. Like I wasn't aware of any space where that existed. So I felt a lot of pressure, honestly, because even if people don't necessarily say, oh, abstinence is best in their opinion, everything that they do, the way that they talk, the way that programs work, it very much feels that way. So I have to say, harm reduction, discovering that was pretty pivotal in my life. And ever since then, that's been the focus of my personal, I guess, life. And just kind of, there is a lot to say about being connected to other people who use drugs. So there was an opportunity to be part of SUNAR, like Katie mentioned, in that Atlantic region. And, we took it. I have to say that I didn't think anything was, I guess, really missing from my life in terms of drug use, right? Like I have these supports, I have these whatever, I go to school, I go to work, but having the space around other people who use drugs was amazing. But I would log on to those meetings feeling arguably pretty hurting. Because the world around makes it known that they don't like drug users, right? Drug users or drugs are bad, so therefore the people who use them are bad, right? Like that's kind of a synonymous thing, whether conscious or not. So the power of just being in a virtual space with people who use drugs, I really needed that a lot more than I ever thought. I didn't know it was missing, but to be able to go somewhere online, feeling pretty down, full of self-stigma, and then to leave that space feeling actually good about yourself, not only just neutral, but good because we're doing real work. And it was just, I don't know how to describe it, but I always left just feeling far better about myself, self-esteem wise, confidence wise. And just, it reinforced the idea that no, just because I use drugs, like there's still value there, right? Like I am still just as smart as my colleagues who, don't use drugs type of thing. And so I think since that point, I've almost been merging those two identities very slowly, but surely. And that's been, I have a lot of privilege, obviously. Like you look at me and you don't think right off the bat, oh, they use drugs every day. Oh, they smoke crack, they whatever, right? Like you don't see that when you look at me, and that has afforded me a great deal of privilege. But with that said, I've still struggled within the systems. I've still struggled, trying to get into detox locally or this and that. And I'm in a position where I have gone away many, many times for rehab, just paying out of pocket. Like, I am someone with the most privilege probably that you could have in this realm. And the fact that I've still struggled to access services or be treated any bit appropriately, that's, that's kind of my focus, I guess, in my everyday work. Because what does that say about people who don't have near the privilege, or who, quote unquote, look like they use drugs? Because oftentimes, right, like, we're labeled either way, but there's a lot of privilege in not looking like somebody who uses drugs, because that's just what it is, right? Like, it's a class thing, it's a, stigma thing, whatever. I forgot in all of that to even mention, right now I manage the Safe Works Access Program, or SWAP, here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm located in St. John's specifically, the capital. And while our program does have a couple, satellite offices, I guess, if you will, with just one person in a couple places across the province, we are kind of the main hub. And it's myself and my colleague for the most part. Sometimes there's a third. It's interesting. Sometimes it's great. It's a blessing and a curse to be this involved in this community, I guess, both personally and professionally, because drug use, or my personal drug use, has absolutely been a tool to really inform everything I do professionally, which, again, great, right? But oftentimes it's, there's only so long that you can go with people bashing people who use drugs, crapping on them, hating on them, before you can only hear that so many times before you believe it and turn it in on yourself, right? So, for better or for worse. But should explain the program. So the SWAP program stands Safe Works Access Program, otherwise known as, and we're the provincial program that distributes, supplies for using drugs. We are the, I guess, naloxone entity for the most part, distributing kits across Newfoundland and Labrador and everything in between. Yeah, I'm cutting myself off now.
Okay. So we'll probably get into this more as we talk, but I was noticing in the information that was sent that Newfoundland has no overdose prevention site or drug checking, and no safer supply. So as far as harm reduction,
correct,
it's what you provide is really like, so what
for the
is
most part,
other than doing it through the mail, is there any other way that harm reduction in Newfoundland presents itself?
Honestly, I got to be honest. Our province, I mean, we're always behind. We're never doing things as quickly. And the lack of that, certainly within this realm, absolutely. Like, our deaths, unsurprisingly, sure, they're going up, but there's been a chosen inaction by the government, for sure, to, just pretend it's not happening, pretend it's not there. And unfortunately, in the last few months, like, our overdose death for this past fiscal year, it doubled, right, since the previous one, because there is no action. No, there really isn't much beyond that. If government were here answering that question, they would say, oh, education and whatever. That's not a tangible solution, though. And we can do, they just made an announcement, oh, we're going to do a review for the one detox center that's located in the capital city, even including Labrador, right? Like, this is the only one. And we've got a couple treatment centers that are not, I wouldn't even consider them that, to be frank with you. Because to me, you have to have, individual counseling and things like that to even call yourself that. So no, not only is there no real harm reduction, besides that, there's just a complete lack of services in just the capital city alone. So you can imagine that, well, one, that's a very small part of the province, but everybody else is actually having access to essentially nothing, almost nothing at all, right? So we are, in my experience and in my travels and whatever, no other province that I've, visited or talked to, whatever, worked with, nobody resembles us in the way that our geography is by far the most complex issue and challenge for us, because it's so spread out. We are so spread out. There are communities that don't even have, a post office or a pharmacy because they have 400 people in them. Like, we have so many little pockets that the geography in it, it's not the only reason, it's not an excuse. And it is something that greatly impacts even just the ability to deliver services that other provinces don't necessarily have. And to your point about, safe injection sites or this and that, there's also not a concentrated area of users in even just St. John's. There's not a place, that everybody congregates, because within St. John's, an area, there's the downtown and there's a lot of people using down there, but there's just as many using in little adjacent, I guess, official towns like Paradise or Mount Pearl, and then Center City and up in the East End. There are equal amounts of drug users kind of everywhere. So introducing one injection site or one, I don't know, anything, right? If there's not a mobile component to anything and everything here, it's only serving a very small percentage. So yeah, while, obviously a safe consumption site or OPS, it wouldn't go astray, and it's only going to serve probably 20% of the drug using population wherever it would be physically located, because we struggle with lack of even just public transportation. Like, these things are virtually non-existent in town, but there is quite literally essentially nothing once you pass the overpass to go out. So aside from us, we try to partner with, some pharmacies, some organizations to have supplies physically closer. Because okay, sure, mail is great, and you're not getting that in the same day, right? Like, especially if it's naloxone, right? Like, it's not an instant, I can ask for it and it's there type of thing. So aside from maybe a site a little bit closer that we've managed to get our stuff into, because like, aside from that, there's nothing. Much of our province is still very much, I guess, functioning, or religion plays a massive role here. Many of our small communities are still dominated by the ideologies of, ex-religion. And due to that, there's a big moral piece that comes into that for people. And our size in general, somebody who is your landlord may be, your sister's cousin's dog's friend, right? Everybody is connected, and there's this culture of gossip as well. There are many things, I think, that make it very unique. And so we certainly, just the baseline, I guess, services, like something like an OPS that's been open in every other province, it's not going to serve the majority here either, unfortunately. So no, I wish I had a better answer for you. I really do. But yeah, we are the only funded organization that does this work, and there are two of us for the entire province. Like, in my office, there's two of us. So capacity it's not a hopeful picture. I will say that.
In the Atlantic provinces, Newfoundland might be a little more rural, but that's kind of a problem throughout all the provinces in the Atlantic region, because there's a lot of rural and very few.
It's tough.
Yeah. Not only that, it seems, and when I was first directed towards Katie, the Atlantic provinces seem to be outside of the national conversation in a lot of ways. Can you talk about how that affects the movement towards getting any of these resources out there to help people? Or
all I'll say is that, to me, it's getting better. There's a lot more. We're certainly included, I think, now more than ever. Katie, okay. Throw it to you.
Yeah, I've seen a move to include us a little bit more, for sure. I think, and now I know that stigma exists everywhere, but it does feel that the Atlantic provinces are a little more conservative, or also maybe just not as aware of the issues. So it takes time for the drug trends to get to us too. Like, a lot of stuff from what I've seen, like what's happening in Vancouver, like the drugs that happen in Vancouver, it takes like 3 to 4 years, it seems, depending. I'm just like kind of guessing here to get us. But the thing that I've been trying to get across to policymakers and the public in general is we see what's happening there. Like it is coming, it is here. We're seeing increased drug poisonings. Like why do we have to wait until it's to that kind of a level to put more supports on the ground now? Is like that's what's frustrating. Like we have to see the same number of people die. We have to see the same number of people's lives destroyed from the lack of services and supports. I think we see like on PEI, for example. I'm not from PEI, but I have, from working with SUNAR, like I got to know a little, the other provinces as well. Like they were promised an OPS, an overdose prevention site. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago.
It was
allocated. Yeah. And so there was a bid by a harm reduction organization to run it, and they were successful. And then the whole place in Charlottetown, PEI, like everybody, there were so many NIMBYs, not in my backyard, that fought this and fought this. And they still don't have an overdose prevention site. And when I spoke to the harm reduction program manager there, it's not happening, at least anytime soon. But what they're looking at is at least implementing the drug checking technology and making that available that was supposed to be in the OPS. Like, to me, this is ridiculous, like just the level of backlash. And I wanted to speak a little bit to New Brunswick too. Honestly, I think Nova Scotia is the most progressive, and we have the most support in all of Atlantic Canada. But in New Brunswick, they've been trying to pass the compassionate, quote unquote, Intervention Act to force people into treatment. And, Mom Stop the Harm members, many organizations wrote an open letter against that. And there's evidence that suggests that we will harm people more. People will come out, not have a tolerance to drugs, and could die from the toxic.
Or death.
Right. For sure. Yeah, exactly. And it provides, it's traumatizing. I consider myself to have a type of forced treatment. I was on the show Intervention Canada, and, so it was very coercive. All my friends and family members were like, we're going to pull our love and support away from you if you don't go to treatment. It was not successful. I'm telling you right now. Went to this treatment center that they didn't know what they were doing. They were happy for me to stay all
traumatic.
Yeah, they were happy for me to stay all day in my room. I eventually left there, went to Toronto, and used heroin, because in 2012, we didn't have access to heroin much in Nova Scotia. So I was very excited to go there and use heroin. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to, like, I guess what we're up against. We have learned in New...
Can I just go back to that point and just right quick before, I think it's visibility, right? Like Toronto, cities, big cities, you do see people sleeping on the ground. You do see public drug use because of the nature of the volume of the people. Whereas here in the Atlantic, that stuff mostly goes hidden, right? Like you don't see it. It's not in your face. And I think that that's a big reason why there's been a lack of action, because it's only really now that, at least in St. John's, that it is starting to be in your face a little bit. Anyways, that I just wanted to add to that before we got away, which is fair.
No, I think that is a good point. I think in Halifax, Nova Scotia, it's definitely more visible, and our own house population is exploding, and it's very scary, just like the rest of Canada. But all I wanted to add was, at least as of May 3rd, the New Brunswick government announced that they weren't introducing that legislation, the Compassionate Intervention Act, at least for now. It's on pause.
That's good.
On pause because they want to make sure they get it right, is what they said. So it's still, a fight that I think that we're up against. But I think in general, like, there's just not much access to safer supply. There is some in New Brunswick. I don't think there's any in PEI. I hope I didn't, that's not wrong, PEI, but I'm pretty sure that's not a thing.
No official pilot programs.
Yeah, no official pilot programs. It could be family doctors here and there that get it.
Exactly. Because I think here, people are doing it and they don't know they're doing it, because this is some new name for this concept that is really just treating the patient as a full human and meeting all their needs. But I think that's what it is in Newfoundland, at least. Okay, sorry. I'm just going to interrupt you and interject for your entire life. Katie, this is nothing new. Anyways, throwback.
I want more of you in my life, Em, so I'm cool with it.
Agreed, but We'll talk after, because right now we could derail this entire thing easily.
I wanted to say too, like SUNAR has been a great movement for sure, but I think we're also lacking drug user unions too, because of some of what Em spoke to, people being like, there's not a lot of big cities. It depends on what you'd call a big city. Halifax is fairly big, but like not really in comparison to other big cities.
But it is in the Atlantic for sure.
Yeah, but being able to like organize more drug user unions and having support for those and being sure that they're actually led by like the decision makers are people who grassroots. Like I would love to see more of that going on because, you know, I live in Salmon River. Like even the name sounds pretty rural. And yeah, and like there's not a lot of harm reduction or people who are fighting for the same thing. So I'm often advocating alongside people on screens like this. And it sucks. Like I wish I had even sooner. It was, you know, mostly all online. And I just wish we could, as people who use drugs, get together more in person, but it's such a hard thing being we're spread out over areas too.
Because this stuff would beat you down, obviously, right? Like this is a very hard world, not only to work in, but to also live at the same time. And so I think, you know, it can be very hopeless and it's easy to give up and just be very pessimistic. I mean, it's because it's very obvious, right? Like society doesn't like adults who use drugs. There's more tolerance for youth and there's more tolerance for, you know, populations like that. But adults, generally speaking, may be the lowest of the low on the social hierarchy of, you know, just the world, right? And so that makes it very tough, I think, to do things just alone, because I'm in your position too, right? We're often advocating in rooms where it's maybe just us, and maybe, you know, most likely there to, you know, check that check mark off on their end. Not to say it's not useful on our end, because to be frank, I mean, if there's an invite in the room, I don't care if you're just checking off your page. I'll take it. But I think there is so much power, both personally, in terms of like, okay, not as hopeless, but yeah, in just joining and going at things as a group, right? Because this can feel very defeating. And I do think, like you said, there is across the Atlantic solely, there is a massive lack of user-led anything at all. Whereas in Ontario, you know, they have like multiple, they have many, or in BC, and we don't have really any that's truly grassroots, started with users, like, and just is managed by users, like just through and through users, and, you know, not people that have been out of it decades, right? Because again, there's a big difference in that. Not to say anybody's experience is not valid, and the drug supply, the drug world, everything about it really got spun on its head during COVID, right? Like that made things a new game, at least in Newfoundland. So I think probably until we somehow figure out how to unite in numbers, I don't know. I think that's where the progress could lie. That's how we might be able to, I don't know, even just on a motivation level.
In that, you mentioned like that here in Ontario, where I am, there is drug user unions. But again, rural issues come into play because where I am, it's 2 hours from Toronto and just about an hour away from other major cities in southern Ontario. But in my small town, people I know who are using are totally unaware of what goes on in those city centers. And it's only like to some areas where there'd be drug user unions, it's only a 45-minute drive. But the people in my town are totally apart from that. They don't realize what's going on. It's hard for this sort of thing, this sort of message to be broadcast to small areas. It's
again the geography, right? And the sense of disconnection, or the real disconnection that it causes, is really like it's a huge barrier to all of this, any of it, especially when you're talking like grassroots, no real funding. Because again, like funding's another thing, you know, groups have to sustain themselves somehow. And not that you would go through the government or an official entity like that, regardless of who you ask for it from. Again, drug users, like bottom of the barrel, anybody will probably be giving funds maybe over drug users, unfortunately. But that's stigma is so prevalent and is comes into every single interaction or lack of action. Yeah, I never used to understand perfectly the phrase stigma kills. And yes, I know I'm absolutely on a tangent right now. And it is so dishearteningly true. And I think it's the reason for a lot of, I think it's, I guess, a big part of the reason why we are in the place we are now, just even considered in the Atlantic areas, right? Because I would look at Toronto and like people are definitely not that disconnected. You can walk places. They have walkable cities, great public transit, etc. Whereas I don't know what public transit or cabs are like in Halifax, but abysmal here on the best day, and it only exists in the main city center of St. John's, right? Go out past the overpass, there's barely even cabs. So, which I assume is much the same where you are, maybe.
Yeah. Like as far as things like that, we're starting to get some movement on connection like that. So I don't really want to talk bad about it, but really it is bad right now. We are so close for people in my area that want to connect to those bigger city centers. And yet so far, if you don't have a car, like if you really want to get to any cities from where I am, you have to make it an overnight trip if you're not using cars, because the timing of the new bus system is horrible. So you can't really go into the cities, do anything, and then make it home. It's weird.
I wanted to add, I think part of the challenge as well, as I spoke to the fact that it takes longer sort of for the drug trends to reach us, but they do reach us. Like we're seeing xylazine and benzos and fentanyl. Like benzos and fentanyl have been around, depending on what province in the Atlantic region, for at least a few years, if not more. Xylazine is like newer in our supply, but it's here. And I think too, in other provinces, it's been going on for longer. So even the general public has a better understanding of harm reduction, like because it's in the news and this and that. And I think that's a bit of a challenge too. It's like it feels like sort of a newer concept. Of course, we have had like needle distribution programs and all of that for a while, of course, to reduce the spread of like HIV and hepatitis C. But now, of course, it's that people are dying from the toxic drug supply. So we need more, harm reduction, like safer supply and overdose prevention sites. And like, so that stuff is like a newer concept here, I think. So one thing that I've been talking with a lot of people about lately is like, I don't think talking to politicians is the way to go, because for a while that's what we were trying. And like I spoke with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Yara Sachs, and it felt like she was meeting with us because that's what she had to do. And she looked busy, honestly. We didn't seem to have our attention, and she seemed to really like fake her grief alongside us, and even said like, yes, the government I'm working for supports decrim. And a month later, she was the person that announced that they were scaling back the decrim in BC. And like, it's just so frustrating. So I'm starting to see that as more and more a waste of time, and recognizing like it's really the general public that needs to understand, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to vote. And honest to God, I think if the majority of Canadians wanted drugs at corner stores available, all drugs, and I'm not saying that's what I want, but let's say they did, and like that's what the majority wanted, I feel like the government would probably do it, because like they want to stay in power and they want those votes, and and so I think like what I'm starting to realize is first we need to educate the general public, but how? Because we're always preaching to the choir. It seems like it's not important to a lot of people until it affects them, which means until their loved one probably dies or starts using drugs. And so, I had an experience recently where I did facilitated a 3-hour in-person event with service providers in Nova Scotia. And there were these group discussions, and I was going from table to table. And this person worked in a hospital, and they said, I really believe that the goal of harm reduction is abstinence. And I was like, oh, like, have you listened to anything that I've said? And so I see this happening, and like, I didn't see that as my fault, number one, that I didn't explain it well enough, because I've been doing this like long enough, and I didn't see it as my fault. And in a way, I didn't even see it as their fault. I just felt like they're so steeped, we're all so steeped in this stigma and like this idea that abstinence is success and this and that. You can't grasp it in a 3-hour event. Like, telling people to like,
sorry.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
That to challenge their biases and challenge that stigma starts with your thoughts. And it's pretty hard. You have to have that meta awareness and metacognition. And a lot of people just like, and me too, my thoughts are just so automatic. It takes some work and it takes some practice. Like, that's like cognitive behavioral therapy in a way, like you have to recognize those thoughts first and foremost, and then challenge them with the truth and with more positive thoughts. And like, it just seems like a daunting thing to overcome, honestly. Like, people need so much education, and I don't know how we provide it or how we reach people like en masse. I don't know if we can like have YouTube ads from drug user unions, or like has to come from moms because they believe them more. But like, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and how do we counter this disinformation? Oh, that's so frustrating, because like it must be so confusing unless you like work in this field to see like what's truth and what's not. Like anyway,
I think okay. So, no, I was just gonna say, I think the abstinence thing comes from the fact that is how people are oftentimes, I guess harm reduction is presented in a way to many people as basically saying that it's a way to sobriety or leaving that up for interpretation is the only reason why much of the public even chooses to buy into it in the first place. Because they are shown that, or told like, no, this is, you can't go to treatment if you're dead. It's just keeping people alive long enough. Right? So I think automatically there is this assumption that this is a means to an end. Whereas obviously we know that, and it's a much harder concept for people to grasp, that no, people actually don't have to want to get sober. That's not everyone. That's not everyone's journey. That's not what works for them. People can highly function without it. It's just people can't go around yelling at the top of their lungs that they use drugs. That's a social, professional, personal risk. So I think people don't know that they're talking to drug users every day. Like, there's this idea that those people are a very separate portion of society, whereas no, they're just actually literally everybody. But yeah, I think that's why, Katie. I really think that's why. It's because of the way it's presented initially for that buy-in. It's bullshit, but I think that's why.
Something you brought up when Emily was saying that she's on a tangent. It seems, especially in Parliament right now, there's especially conservative MPs allowed to go on tangents, and it returns to the misinformation where they'll go in and they'll scream really loudly about BC and how 100% of people, including drug users, were against what happened there, the decrim pilot project. And I mean, for people doing the work you're doing, that's got to be frustrating that they can stand up in Parliament, lie from when they open their mouth to start talking to the end about things like that, and say that they're quoting research that they can't even produce. So
look at Pierre, right? Though, look at him and all the damage that he's done just on this little nonsense campaign trail, right? Like, the damage is severe. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I feel there's a question here, but I don't know how to ask it of you, like about that frustration that causes.
Go.
Oh yeah, I could go on and on about this. Yeah, like it's sometimes I ask myself if I'm just doing this work because I'm so pissed off. Like, and I don't want to be driven by anger, but it's a motivating force, I'll put it that way. It's incredibly frustrating. It just like the government, they're so hypocritical. Like they're starting in Nova Scotia, they're starting to recognize that we're experts here, and that's been happening for a long time in like BC and Ontario. But even those provinces, they're recognizing they're the experts and then like listening to them and then not doing what they're suggesting, like what even happened with the decrim. Like my understanding of decrim, like they were going to these meetings like Van Du and other folks and saying 2.5 grams is ridiculous, we need way more than this, like that threshold just doesn't make sense for us, and then they don't listen. So it's just become this like it doesn't always, like sometimes I have really good engagement with like researchers or like other organizations that actually follow through with what I suggest. But like I would say government is the worst at this. Like why are you it's just it's so hypocritical. You're saying we're the experts, but you're not going to listen to us. You're not going to actually like let that inform your work. I don't even know how to express the frustration.
It seems policy can be made not on facts or research. Policy is made on opinion. So,
but in this realm too, it's their morals and their values drive these opinions, and then that is put on the entire drug using community, because the way you personally feel, I don't think that should come into your professional anything. Since when has that been a thing, right? So again, when it's drug use though, people can't even separate those two things, right? Like, so that comes into play as well as people's values and morals and whatever in like on the macro scale and also in everyday interactions. But it's a huge barrier.
And I saw like a doctor on X say that if they were to not provide every available treatment to a cancer patient because of their quote unquote feelings, they'd be fired. And, we like,
you prescribe religion. Religion is prescribed.
And yeah, it's just crazy. And, I've been
12-step cult is, sorry, just make that clear.
Yeah. And like, I think like something I was talking about with other people who use drugs and some clinicians and stuff like during the Mob Stop the Harm AGM is like, could we put in a complaint to the College of Doctors, Physicians, and whatever for not prescribing safer supply, because doctors refuse to do that. And I don't want to misquote Dr. Andrea Serrata. She had suggested that one complaint would likely do nothing. However, if a bunch of us complained, it might do something, because during COVID, there were doctors that were spreading misinformation about like vaccines and stuff, and people complained, and the college actually did something. And so, like, I'm always looking for a way, like, how do we, just get around.
That's a good one, because so, if you put out an Atlantic campaign of sorts, like
maybe all the people that need safe supply can make a complaint to their doc. But then there's also, okay, say they did all make complaints to their doctor. There's also concerns like, we know in the Atlantic provinces, we're hurting for doctors. I've been fired, quote unquote, fired.
I don't think it's the doctor though, the college.
I know it would go to the college, but I don't.
Not through them. I mean, you can apply, like you can submit these things directly to the college.
I know, but I don't trust that the college wouldn't inform the doctor, even if they say to the doctor, a certain patient is looking for safe supply and you won't prescribe it. They'll probably know who that is. Like, so I just worry that, like, and that's the problem with anything when it comes to people who use drugs. If we make noise, we face repercussions, like serious ones, because like we're just always assumed to be at fault and stuff. Hopefully that wouldn't happen. Like, I'm not aware of the processes and the procedures of the college, but we have a reason to be mistrustful of the healthcare system, of the not justice system. It's not justice, the legal system. Like to say, like we don't trust these systems for good reason. So I also worry if I told my fellow people who use drugs to make this complaint and there were repercussions for them, that would be terrible, because it's not so easy to just get a doctor.
To me, you're looking at you said that, I envision it as there's a mass complaints in general. Hi, we know that you are not treating patients wholly. Like there is not, like it's a general thing. You're not talking cases or specific people. I feel like that would be the angle. But like you said, and I said earlier, like doctors will treat the whole patient for every other ailment. But often if you use drugs, not only are you not going to get treated, like I've run up so many times against, if you use any drugs at all, they'll likely say, well, can't really do much until you get back to baseline. There's this obsession of being even just sober to like, for doctors to be able to move forward. And aside from that, they won't really engage with you. So I think, how could they just not treat the whole patient in one specific ailment, right? And again, the stigma, whatever, but it really is life or death. So do you not have a professional ethical responsibility? I don't know. I think there's a case that could be made there, bud, for sure.
Yeah, I think we're treating this as like a de facto drug user union here. Like
just getting sucked into it.
Yeah, no, just like looking for advocacy solutions. It's so hard. And like, if I could add about diversion, I know this is a huge concern. And like, as I spoke to my own lived experience, like the majority of people I got opioids from didn't use them. They didn't use them, and they sold them. And I'm not saying that's bad. Those people kept me alive because it was a regulated supply. But they're only concerned with people use drugs diverting. And I think there's very specific reasons why people divert. One could be that they can't meet their basic needs. That's a system issue. Why aren't we providing people with universal income? Like, and they could be diverting because it's not matching their tolerance level or the drug they're using on the street. To me, that's another system issue. We need to address like supply chain issues with with pharmaceutical companies, and we need to get these pharmaceutical grade alternatives, and people are sharing with those that they love. Like, you can't, as a person who uses drugs, watching someone in withdrawal and you know what that's like and not do something for them when you are concerned that they might die from the street supply, like, yeah, you're gonna divert. And like, and how beneficial that is. And that's another system issue. There's not enough access to safer supply. So like, when they put diversion on us, I get pretty pissed off about that too, because it's a very protective factor. And I heard, clinicians speaking to, well, it creates more availability of opioids. And so the more availability, the more people will use. But like, at least they're using something that's regulated, of known potency and quantity. I don't know. Maybe that's terrible too, but I think it's great.
That's the opposition. Again, that's a topic they're exploiting right now on opinion to scare Canadians that don't know any different. Oh, there's so much diversion. There's so much this, da da da. When in reality, there probably really isn't. And I think we'd be remiss to not also connect this, like chronic pain patients too. We're all suffering for the same reasons, right? Like they're not getting access to what they need. Neither are more so like consistent drug users, I guess, is what I'll say. But those two communities, I think, have largely been like pitted against each other, i.e. blaming people who use drugs, when, we're all in the same boat here. It's not a competition, but it needs, like, system reform is a big part of this, unfortunately. Yes, we would love to not rely on the systems and love to just, grassroots organizations all the way. And the system is the majority right now, at least in Newfoundland. So we do have to kind of, I guess, create, maintain, train this, I guess, yes, harm reduction, but harm reduction to a lesser extent lesser extent maybe is the word, I don't know. But this type of harm reduction that can exist like in the system, but we also know full well that there's probably not going to be much, I guess, expansion. And I'm not talking about hospitals or safer supply or any of that stuff. Just the fact that, yeah, it's really tough for that to exist, run by doctors especially, because those are, again, like Katie said, there's a lot of history there's a lot of trauma, and the repercussions in and of itself. Like, do people generally face repercussions? I guess they do, for advocating about or like toward certain subjects. I guess some people face repercussions, but when people who use drugs use it, it's not just the direct repercussion of healthcare, this and that. Like, it's your social life, the way people see you is at risk. Your job is at risk. Like, every single thing about your being is essentially at risk. Because again, once people hear you use drugs, they can say like, "Oh, I accept that. Oh, I whatever, da da da," and a lot of that goes out the window when they're faced with an actual situation. Unfortunately, yeah, I don't know. I lost myself partway through that.
There was something that was brought up. Katie brought it up, and I had not been aware of it. So you said you were on Intervention Canada show. Is that what is that? Because I had never heard of that.
Yes,
You don't have to open that can of worms, by the way. I'm just telling you that as somebody, you know what I mean? Just
yeah. No, you know what? I don't mind. For a lot of years, I didn't talk about it because that video is still surfacing. Like, you can still find it. So maybe if I talk about it, it'd be great if you're able to include this piece, that the story they portrayed about me was manipulated and manufactured. They really portrayed me as like this prostitute and like this manipulative, like they really exploited me. And I wanted to say that I did like had to sign informed consent to be on the show. So the premise of the show is, they come in and they say that they're doing a documentary on addiction, and there's an American version that's just called Intervention, and it's by A&E. And so they made, for a short period of time, maybe 4 years, a Canadian version. And so they follow you around and watch you use drugs. They wanted to watch me even throw up in the toilet. They wanted to follow me into the bathroom, and I was like, no.
Disgusting, man. It's
and
disgusting.
then yeah, they talk to your loved ones, do like a intervention, and like tell them how they have to write about all the things they will take away from you. Like this tough love they'll take away from you if you don't like get treatment. Meanwhile, they're following me. There was only one camera guy, and he gained my trust pretty quickly. And it didn't seem like this big thing that would be televised for everyone to see. But even when I signed the consent, like
that's not informed consent though, dude.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get there. Can you mute for a second?
All right.
It is hard for me to talk about. So they also, okay, this is something people do not know. They pay you to be on the show, which is even more coercive because they know I need money to buy drugs and not be sick every day. So they paid me. So, I did have a sense that it was Intervention, the show. And I agreed anyway because I needed the money. A part of me was like, well, maybe like I can't afford treatment, it's really expensive, like everywhere. There's like in Nova Scotia, there's one treatment facility for all women with this huge wait list. They take like 12 people a year or something. And so part of me was like, well, maybe I want that. I don't know. I really like the place that I was in 2012, your day-to-day survival mode. I didn't even have a home, and so yeah, you're gonna offer me money and like I get this, yeah, so sure. But like even parts of my story that I told them because they interviewed me, they changed. Like it wasn't accurate at all. The place that they sent me to was brand new. There was no regulation. And this is what I want people to know about treatment as well. These for-profit treatment centers, they don't want you to succeed. Otherwise, you won't come back, and they don't have a repeat customer. And so I was molested by the massage therapist. And I had been so mistreated and so abused up to that point that I didn't even do anything or say anything. Like it was awful. And the place that I went was very fancy and very expensive. And I learned that they didn't even pay for that treatment. That treatment facility, they get advertising because it says where I'm going, right? And so they didn't want to kick me out when I didn't do the things that they wanted me to do that were stupid, like they would everybody else, because then they say at the end of the show, Katie left shortly thereafter. They tried to put me on Suboxone when I went there, and it was so horrible. In the middle of it, I was hallucinating and ran out into traffic and tried to kill myself. They didn't call for help. It was terrible. And I was surrounded by people that were super rich that I could not relate to because they had paid like 30 grand a month. And they were there because like their alcohol use was affecting the amount of times they cleaned their house. Like they weren't vacuuming their house properly or something. Like, so they just could not relate. And not everyone, like some had more challenges, but again, they were just so financially privileged. Like I just could not relate. They had not had to do things they didn't want to do to get drugs like I had. And some of them didn't have necessarily a daily dependency on a chemical like I had. It was the worst experience of my life.
Because it's insane and unethical. It's just beyond.
And they want to portray, like what I wanted to say too, is they want it to look really bad. Like, because, and I can't even watch a lot of reality TV shows like this for this reason, is I know that it's a lot of bullshit. Like they even like try to create conflict in my family so they could film it.
That's good TV.
Absolutely. And like that just produces more trauma for me. Like they just portrayed me like in such a bad light. And like there was good things that I did even that week that they followed me, and people I helped and kind words I said, but none of that was shown. And so you're right, it's the media. Like it's the media, it's news, it's TV. Like they just always want to portray us as awful, and we're not. So yeah, it is a difficult part of my story, but I see the value in telling it now, because even though people wouldn't be followed by a TV show from some of these, like the Compassionate Intervention Act, I can see it being similar like that for people that, then if we're forcing people into treatment, their families think, oh, this is a good thing too. And so like maybe they start doing stuff like, pulling their love and support away so that, they think it's going to help them in forced treatment. I don't know. Like, but I see the parallels. I just see the parallels between that show and forced treatment, because it really was coerced and it felt kind of forced. You're filmed to go to this place, and if you say no, it's like the whole world knows. Like, what are you supposed to do? Thank you for listening. It was long.
Like your family, I have no doubt, was manipulated as well into believing that this was a good thing. Like you see it in the troubled teen industry, right? Like parents are told that, oh, this is a boarding school, it's so nice, da 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 da. So they genuinely think, like, it's not even out of malice necessarily all the time. And it's just really scary because, well, clearly that television show also had no professional standards, but it's very scary because there are no repercussions when you do these things to people who use drugs. And that is very unfortunate. And, just exploit the fact that people need money to feed their habit. Like it's very coercive, very exploitative, and very dangerous. Like it's unfortunate as hell, because it's a wonder you didn't die during all that, right? Like that is surprising.
I tried to kill myself twice while I was there. Like it was just awful there. And I want to just like reinforce what you said. Like the interventionist did teach my family tough love was the way to go. And that produced a lot of like just a really terrible relationship when you show up at your family's door saying like, I can't afford food and I'm hungry and I don't want to steal from the grocery store. I don't even want money. Do you have any spare food I can have? And they slam the door in your face because that's what they've been taught to do. I don't know if I can ever forgive that. I'm sorry.
That's
like,
fair.
Like that was just, yeah. And that's what they were taught, right?
But that tough love thing was widely popular among entire society. And that tough love concept, all it does is, tough love essentially equates to like death these days, right? Like there is no, like, it's just, there's a whole lot more on the line, and tough love, the consequences these days are more than family conflict and this and that, da da da. Oftentimes that person ends up dead, because why would they have a point? Like, I wouldn't want to live if everything I cared about was removed from me. Like, why would you care? You're not going to get any better that way. That's not promoting wellness either. So a lot of this is so ass backwards, not research dependent. It's just like cruel. And again, this is a population that you can do this with and face zero repercussions. And that's, I think, a big part of it as well, right? Like, and people know that. It's easy to exploit. You can do whatever you want, walk all over it, and nothing, not going to face any bit of penalty. And then they went on to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And they're just any one entity profiting off of people's pain and misery and whatever. But especially in this area, you kind of have to go around assuming that's why people are including you or asking you to do things or whatever, at least half the time.
And you know,
quite dangerous to you. Yeah.
And that's what they're doing now, though, still in our society. Like the recovery model in Alberta, they want that so bad because like there's so many of them that can profit from these treatment centers because they're for profit, right? And I don't, as I said, I don't think they want us to quote unquote recover or like find abstinence, because then they have repeat customers, you know, and those treatment centers need to be regulated, and we need to see data, statistics on, is this even working? Because a lot of them are based,
and it's not, they don't have to try though.
Yeah, they don't work. We don't have them from all of them, but I mean, a lot of them are based on such archaic, like, I'm sorry, but 12-step programs are archaic. They were created in the early 1900s, and like so many of them, you have to go to 12-step programs, or it's like the 12-step philosophies are such a big part of it. And we're in the 21st century. Didn't even know what century we're in at first, but like, come on. Yeah. So we need to have harm reduction even in treatment centers, even just like throwing people out when they start using again. Makes no sense if we're to believe this disease model, which I think is bullshit. But the disease model suggests that's just a process of like, you know, recovery and relapse. So somebody relapses and you kick them out. That's when they need help most, is it not? Like, anyway, it makes no sense. And we went tangent, didn't we, for 20 minutes. Whew.
It's wild and nothing makes sense, because again, you're in the hospital, almost died. Tell me another ailment that healthcare professionals will essentially prescribe or encourage you like to go to a group that is not based on science, that was just has no scientific backing, no benefit, no anything. And that's what the medical professionals are also telling you or inching you toward, right? And that's very scary, because there's a whole other, like, I mean, they fit the definition of a cult. You're leaving, it's just, there's trauma within that, and there's not a whole lot of care if this is working, what this is doing to people. And I guess that still comes from the lack of accountability, repercussions, whatever. Because again, people who use drugs, adults who use drugs, at the bottom, but that's it.
Yeah, but I wanted to add to that really quick. You made me think as well that even how we measure success, we need to think about. Because when I asked, you know, we don't even have the statistics of how successful these programs are. How successful a program should be measured by the goals of the individual person. My goal might be to use occasionally. My goal may be to not use one substance, but I want to use another. My goal might be abstinence, you know, like, and so it should be, my goal may be to hold a job. My goal might be to reunite with my family, get my kids back. Like my goal, I don't have kids, but you know, like there's so many goals out there, and that's how we should determine success of safer supply programs, of OAT programs. Do I have flexibility in my life? Do I have agency over my life? Those self-defined goals of people who use drugs, and often their goals are like retention and treatment, or like haven't died from a drug poisoning. That's an important goal of almost everyone I know who uses drugs. Like that's an important goal, but like some of these you know, even OAT, like I see papers on this, like, you know, how many people use drugs, right? Based on a urine test, like, and that shouldn't be, that's not the goal for everyone. So why are you using that as a measurement of success of the program? You know, some people want to be on OAT so they don't have to be looking for drugs every day, but when they have a few extra bucks, they want to use, you know, and so you can't say that that's not success. Anyway,
with the rehab industry, though, they do just judge it based on like how long someone is sober. And the science does tell us that not very long. It's like less than 5%, maybe, certainly less than 10 of people who have long-term sobriety. So right there, that's just the model we're offering when there's quite literally, again, zero scientific backing on that. And that's what I think that's what the entire recovery industry is made of, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Katie and Emily for the interview. In the description of this podcast, you can find links to more information about Moms Stop the Harm, the Substance User Network of Atlantic Region, SUNAR, and Safe Works Access Program, SWAP, in St. John's. Visit woodstein.ca, that's WOOD-STEIN.ca. You can support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Colin Burrows. There are bonus videos and more for people who support through Patreon. Like, share, comment, follow, and support Woodstein Media and this podcast, and have a wonderful day. Shortly after I chatted with Katie and Emily, my brother-in-law Cy passed away following a heroic battle with cancer. When a group of his loved ones gathered to say goodbye at his cremation, we stood outside while a playlist of some of his favorite songs consoled us. With almost perfect timing, the Tragically Hip launched into Ahead by a Century. And then a technical difficulty cut the song off. It was sadly appropriate. I'm ending this episode with an a cappella version of that song. Rest in peace, Cy. It's an honor to call you friend and be part of your family.
First thing we climb a tree, and maybe then we talk, or sit silently and listen to our thoughts, with illusions of someday cast in a golden light. No dress rehearsal, this is our life. And that's when the hornet stung me, and I had a feverish dream with revenge and doubt. Tonight we smoke them out. You are ahead by a century. You are ahead by a century. You are ahead by a century. Stare in the morning shroud, and then the day began. I tilted your cloud, you tilted my hand. Rain falls in real time, rain fell through the night. No dress rehearsal, this is our life. And that's when the hornet stung me, and I had a feverish dream with revenge and doubt. Tonight we smoke them out. You are ahead by a century. You are ahead by a century. You are ahead by a century. And disappointing you is getting me down.
that's the thing. I really believe that what you're doing is important and shouldn't be fucked with.
Thanks so much, Colin. No, I had a lot of fun. I never get to see Emily because she lives in Newfoundland. I should really go fly down there. So it's nice to hang out and nice to get to know you a little bit, Colin. I appreciate the work you're doing. When I talk about like educating public, like that's one way through podcasts. So I appreciate the work you're doing too.
All right. Thank you.
Please cut out every time I called you Dan, because I know that your name is right there. It's in my email, it's in everywhere, and I just did not bother to check because of who I am as a person. So yeah, that'll come up a couple times. And just know that I'm saying technically Colin.
Yeah. So there is some editing I'll have to do.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.